At the heart of any API, there is data. And how you handle that data will determine how many clients are going to trust and consume your API. This video, we're going to see one way how to handle that data effectively. And this will be to show only what's intended to be seen to the client. Now imagine having an API of a payroll that shows your salary to every employee, or a health system API that shows your vitals to every user within a system. That is unacceptable. If that idea of handling your data effectively excites you, then welcome to Code and Parallel, where we teach developers step-by-step, easy to follow ways that have them building production-ready APIs. If that is what you're about, then let's begin. All right, so here we have our basic API running, which doesn't conform to the data rules. So what you can do in this API is you can get all users. If you click execute there, it gets you 3 users that are already in the data store. And I could just copy the ID there and come to get users by ID. I put the ID over there. It gets me that user. And I could also post a user. So let's just create one user. We're going to call it Code and Parallel. Last name and Parallel. Email codeandparallel@codeandparallel.com. Date of birth, this one be born in 2000. The password would be here, right? And we're gonna create that, and it gives back the user. Okay. Now, let's get our users and see the user we've created. It's called Empire. Here they are. Now something is wrong here. It gives you back the password, right? That's an anomaly. You don't want data that's sensitive to be shown to the public. So if somebody wants to consume this API, he will see all passwords of the users, which is a no-no. So we need to fix this and say, you know what, we want to show these guys just the list of our users without showing them our sensitive information. Even here, once we create, it gives back the object you've created, and it's also giving you back the password. We don't want to do that. Okay, so how do we filter this data to enable us to hide what we don't want people to see? So we use what we call data transfer objects. So a data transfer object is just as it sounds. It's a class, a plain old C# class. It's called a POCO. And all it does is it just transfers data. Within it, there's nothing to do with data manipulation, all right? So I want us to go through the code base first and just briefly, and then we start implementing this filtering, okay? So we've got a schema, and in this case, it's just one class. It's called user. It has ID, first name, last name, email, date of birth, and the password, right? That's the schema, okay? And on this schema, we can do 3 things. We can create a user, add, we can get our users, and we can get a user by ID. I think you've seen it in the API. And this is just the implementation. Now the implementation is those 3 users are just hard-coded into a list, and all you do is play with the list to get whatever you want. Now in this case, it doesn't matter what your data source is. It doesn't really matter. What matters is how do you filter that. So it doesn't matter if it's Entity Framework, if it's MongoDB, if it's SQL Service, MongoDB, whatever. It could be a cache, a list, Redis. What matters is, can you filter out that list? Okay, and then you will see that there is one helper class there. All it does is it gets a date of birth and it just calculates, it returns your age. You see why it's important, because I want to go in depth of this mapping. All right, so this is the controller. So if you say get by ID, it goes to get the user and it just returns you the user. Now the question is, we want to return something that doesn't have password. So we're going to create a folder. We're going to call it DTO, Data Transfer Objects. Right? So we're going to call that, create a new folder, call that DTO. DTO. Right? So and it appears I already have that folder, and I wonder why. Okay. Data transfer objects, DTO. So usually you have two types of DTOs in my opinion. You've got the read ones, which you get data, and you've got the create one, which you use to create data. So in this case, I'm going to create one that just reads users. So I'm going to call it, so under DTO class, call it user read DTO, right? So it reads. Now, what do you want the user to see? In this case, I just want the user to see the first name. I want the user to see the full name, the email, and the age. Okay, so user read DTO, right? So in this case, I just want the user to see three things. I want them to see the full name, so prop string, okay, public string, full name, right? And there we go. Let's just put string dot empty. I want them to see the user's age. And finally, I want them to see the user's email address. So string email. Okay. So I want string dot empty. String dot empty. So I want, when you query here full users, instead of you getting this, I want you to get the full name, the age, and the email. That's why I've given you this helper function, so that all it will do is take in the date and it will give you the age. That's all it's doing here. All right. So we've got our user read DTO over there, right? How do we implement it? So we're going to say, let's go to the controller. And once you get here, once you get this user, what you would do is you're going to say var user read DTO is equal to a new user read DTO. All right, so let's bring that over there, control dot. All right, and we want to create a new one. Okay, so there you go. So once you get here, you're going to say we're going to start with full name, right? So full name is going to be, I'm going to use string interpolation. So you're going to say whatever the user is there, right? You've got the first name there. So user dot first name space user dot last name. That gives you the full name. And for you to use the age, you're going to say age is equal to, you're going to bring in helper function, helper functions dot, it's called get current age, and this current age is going to get user dot where is dot birth, right? And the last one is email, and the email you're going to use the user dot email. All right, and here you're going to return that DTO over there. Okay, let's see. So control F5 to see about that. It should refresh here. It should refresh over there, and once it finishes, it should start a new instance. It's taking its time. All right. right. Okay, so I'm gonna get all user so that I get the ID. So execute. I'm going to copy the ID, and we're going to say get, try it out, paste that, and yeah, there you have it. So Jen and Do 32 test. All right, so we have managed to filter our data here. We're only showing what we want to show, but the problem here would be, if you look at this, let's go to the controller. You have to do this again here on get all users, but it's a list, so you have to loop through the list. Again, for create, you have to send it back as well. Now that might work, but if there's a change in one place, you have to come at the get here and add it there. You have to come at the get all and add it there. You have to come at the post and add it there. That is not effective, and that will get us nowhere in terms of our efficiency. And for the sake of consistency, so just put it so that it knows. So when you're doing the things, it will know. So this will not be consistent. This will give us problems every now and then. So what do you want us to do? What we'll do here, we're going to use AutoMapper. AutoMapper is made for mapping these DTOs, mapping DTOs and whatnot. So AutoMapper will be used in a way that is efficient. So the first thing is you have to bring in AutoMapper. So right click on your project and go to manage NuGet packages. And go to browse and type AutoMapper. All right, search for it. There's AutoMapper, there's AutoMapper to Dependency Injection. Use the Dependency Injection one and click install. I'm using 11.0. Click OK. Now we're going to register AutoMapper in the Dependency Injection container so that we can use it everywhere. So you're going to go to the program.cs, and under here you're going to bring builder.services add AutoMapper, and the argument is just text assembly. So you could put program.cs there, but let's just use some reflection. You're going to say app domain dot, you're going to get the kind domain, and then you're going to get assemblies, right? So we have registered AutoMapper there. Okay, that's fine. The next stage would be, we have to configure the things we are mapping, because we map one object to another. So we need a place where we can configure. So I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call it people call it profiles. It seems to be, I don't know what's going on, but so we're going to call it profiles. AutoMapper profiles. So this will be where you're going to map your profile. So just get a class there, call it user profiles, because we want to map things to do with the user. So call it user profiles, like so. This, make sure it inherits from the profile, which is an AutoMapper class. So control dot bring AutoMapper in, and you're going to bring a constructor there. So how we map is we map source. Okay. Now for you to map, what you need is you're going to say, what do you want to map? I want to map this user to the user DTO, all right? So I wanted to see things that are similar here and similar there, and it will map automatically, right? Very well. So let's go to the user profiles. So what you do is you put create map. You see there's source and destination, right? That's very important. So source goes to destination. Source goes to destination, right? So your source would be, what's the source? The source is the user, right? Control dot bring it in, and what's your destination? Your destination is user read TTO, and bring it in. And just like that, we have mapped. We are saying this would be your source, that will be the destination. So now there will be no need for us to do this. We won't new up a new, we're not going to new up a new object and then individually assign each property. Now we're just going to map it straight up. All right. So it means I can comment out this code because it will no longer be used. So how do we map now? All right. So you're going to say, so the user is there. You want to say, so you're going to say var user read DTO is equal to. Before we do that, we need to bring the AutoMapper into the, because we have injected it here. It's here. So we need to bring it into the controller. So we use that. All right. So you're going to say dash imapper. imapper, just call it mapper so that we can use it in this controller. Control dot and select create an assigned property with this mapper with a small letter. And then just put an underscore there. I prefer that. But if you use this, it's fine. So we're going to use this for our mapping. This mapper for our mapping. All right. So here you're going to say this DTO. Now we're going to say mapper dot map. Now in the profiles, it was source to destination. Here it will be destination to source. So what do you want your destination to be? You want it to be user read DTO. And what's your source? Your source is the user there. All right. And you close. And you've mapped. You've said, this is my source, it's the user read DTO. This is my destination, user read DTO. And this is my source, which is that list there. Now, once we do that, we're giving it back. Now let's press Ctrl F5 and to see if we've actually mapped and see how best we can do that. So Ctrl F5. It's building and then it has to refresh over there. All right, so let's go to get, try it out. If I do that dot, let's see what comes. Whew. What happens? Full name is blank. Age is 0. Email, at least we've got the email. So our mapping has mapped, but we're not getting the data that we're expecting. What could be the case? All right. So by default, if you map it, let's go to the profile. If you map it like this, it will mirror and see. Okay, does user, so it will see. There's full name there. It'll go to the user, it won't find full name. So it defaults to an empty string. It'll go to your user read DTO, it will see age there. Then it'll go to your user, there's no age. It will default that to a default, which is a 0, right? Then it will see email in user. Then it will see email in user read DTO. Then it will map that. Hence, the email was able to map, the rest failed. All right. So by default, it has failed because not everything is matching. So what do? We're going to configure it further to help us do that. All right. So our next step here is to go back to the configurations, to the profiles there, and reconfigure. All right. So we're still playing with this. We just want to give it more qualifications for it to better map. And I could have just stopped here and put here first name. It could have mapped, but I want you to understand what happens when mapping by default fails, because I want to teach you everything here. All right. So let's go to the user profile, and we're going to go down there and say dot. Now we're going into individual properties, which we use for member. Okay, for member there, Customize configuration for individual members. Now I want to go to individual members. So for member, step number 1, a full parenthesis. For member, we're going to start with the destination. So I'm going to say destination. Now our destination is a user read DTO. In that destination, in that user read DTO, we want to get out the full name. So get me the full name from the member, that, all right? And then OPT, so these are just lambda expressions. OPT dot map from. So map from, what does it do? Map destination member using a custom value resolve instance. So we want to resolve it here. No, rather map from. So map from. Then from here, this is our source. So we're gonna say src. Then we're gonna say we want you to map from. All right. src dot first name, all right, and also src dot last name. Okay, we good? Yeah. So what have we done here? We're saying from the destination, get the full name and map it using these two. Okay, what's remaining? We've got the age. So again, go down dot for member. All right, in this scenario, you want to get the destination, but you want to get the age now. So you get the age, and then you're gonna put your comma there, and you're gonna say opt, all right, lambda, and then you map from, all right, and you're gonna use your src. So source goes to source. Now this is interesting. It's gonna resolve itself. We want to use the helper function here, which is called get kind age, and it takes in a data offset, right? So when you're configuring, there's no need to pass it that. It will resolve itself. So src, within that there's the date of birth, right, which we want to use. Dot, funny thing, if you put get kind age here, if you copy this, let's go to the helper function. I want to copy the name of the function. It's called get kind age. If you bring get kind age here, control dot, trust me, it's going to resolve that in real time. So you don't know what to put there. So we have mapped. So now we've mapped two members. The full name and the age has been mapped. Now press Ctrl F5. And as it loads, it should reload here. All right. And boom. Okay. So now we want to say get or. I just want to copy the ID. And I want to copy this ID here, the gender. So expect the full name to be gender and the email there. So let's go to get, try it out, and I'm going to put that over there. And once I press execute, voila. You see, now we're able. So how do we do that? How do we implement it here as well? Very easy. You're going to go to your controller. You're going to get to get all. Now you want to return a list of user read DTO. And here you're going to say var users read DTO. You're going to say is equal to, now you're going to use the mapper dot map, right? What's your source? What's your destination? It's your read, but in this case you want to be a list, and AutoMapper will resolve that list. You see, no need for you to have another profile of a list. And where, okay, so that and users, you close that, and here you're gonna bring user with DTO. All right, let's press Ctrl F5 and check it out. So it loads. Let's get all users. Try it out. and boom, we filled that. With just one line of code here, mapping it. There was no need for us to new up a new instance and then bring a list. That has happened. That's great. Now, if you look at the last endpoint, it's the one for creating. You see that when I try it out, it's telling me to also create an ID. Now, most databases have auto increment, which the user doesn't have to input, or in this case, I'm using GUID, which no user can actually just guess in the head. So we want to have another DTO that will be used to create. But for us to create, we don't want them to give us this ID. Our system will do it on our behalf. All right. So let's follow the same procedure only for creating. So I want you to create. This is a user read. Now we have a user create DTO. So let's add a class. We're going to call it user create DTO. Right. So it'll have everything that the user has except the ID, because our application is going to create that. All right, now let's go back to the user create DTO. So it's going to have everything except the ID in the user. It's all set. All right. So if we're saying the ID will be system generated, then we have to provide it a way to create that user, the ID. So go to the user repository where we're creating a new user. As you can see, what we can do here is we can just say the user that I'm given .id, just make it a new it's a GUID dot new guild. So this, it's gonna create a GUID for you. It's a nice hack. All right, so that's what we're doing. Now we have to configure it. So we're going to go to a profile. Again, remember, source to destination. So in this case, what's our source? Our source will be the command create DTO, because that's what we're getting from the user. Once we get that, we're going to map it into a user, which that user will be given to the repository here, and it will create, right? So in this case, our source will be the DTO. Our destination is going to be the actual user. So create map user create DTO. That should give you a user. All right. And okay, what's the issue here? What is the issue? Do I bring it in? Okay, fine. And in this case, there's no need for us to do further mappings because they're just similar. So it's going to map in your time. All right, let's go to our controller. We're going to get to our controller here. So this is the tricky part. We're giving back the user read DTO because that's what we want the user to read, right? But what we're giving the API will be the user create DTO, right? All right. So first of all, what you need to do here is to map, because you're getting a user create DTO. You want to map it into a user. Once you create, you want to send back a user read DTO. So you also want to map it back to a user read DTO. It's confusing, but it's going to make sense here. So what are we saying now? All right. So we're saying the first step is to say create a user will be equal to, instead of you doing that first, you're going to map it first. You're going to say mapper.map. All right. What's your destination? You want to have a user, right? Where is it coming from? It's coming from that user over there, right? So it's coming from this user here. So we've mapped this. It's now a user. Once we've mapped it, we can now create a user. So we just call it var. We can call it what? We can call it create user. And what's the proper word? Okay. Created user repo. Of course, not nice though, since it's out the fly. So here you want to say user repo.create user. You're going to give it the user you've created. So at this juncture, you have created the user, but you want to give back the user. But whatever you want to give back, you want it to be a user read DTO because it has to conform to those three things: full name, age, and email. Okay, so I'm gonna put comments here. Map create DTO to user. We've done that, and here create user. All right, and here you want to map user to read DTO. All right, so you want to say var user read DTO is equal to mapper dot map. So again, what's your destination? You want it to be a user read DTO, and your source is create user repo. Right? A little bit confusing, but not really hard. So we are going to be given a create read DTO. Unfortunately, our repository here, for it to create a user, it will need a user instance. So it means we have to change this to be a user, and that's the line here. We are saying map this user into a user. So at this point, we have gotten a user. We can go ahead and use this user to create a user, right? But after you've created a user, it sends you back a user instance. But for us to show the client, we don't want them to see everything with the password. We want them to see the user read DTO. So once that comes here, we are sending that, we are also mapping that to the user read DTO, which in turn, we are giving it back to the, so 3 steps, confusing, but if you follow the logic, it's fine. Now let's see, Control F5 to see if it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. So if we go here, first of all, let's get our users just to see we haven't broken anything. All right, that's okay. Let's now try to post. First of all, you see that the ID is gone. So first name would be Max Payne. Email would be mpayne@cu.com. All right, Max Payne was born in 1991. It should be 31 by now. The password would be laugh at my pen. All right, now let's create that. You see now, he's 31, Max Payne. So this is a read DTO. All right, and if we get all, again, it should come. And there's Max Payne. Okay, now where does this thing come in handy? What if somebody comes tomorrow and says, could you please add an ID? It should be visible. You want an ID to be visible. What do? It's easy. You just change one line of code. All you do is go to your read DTO and say these guys they want to have an ID. So just say GUID ID. All right. Now this will map automatically. If I do Control F5, you will see that if I say get users here, well, it's going to return with ID over there. And if I copy this ID of John Doe to get by ID, you'll see that it now brings the ID. See, so just one line of code, we were able to change our output without changing many places. Now that's using data efficiently. And the next thing I want you to see, if you look at the schemas here, you have DTO, you have read DTO. Whoever is using our API won't be able to see how our data structure, our data schema is designed. That's one thing we want to hide from things like SQL injection and whatnot. Anyway, thank you very much if you've read this far. If this video has given you any value, please like, comment, subscribe, share, hit that bell icon, and let us go together on this journey. And thank you very much and have a lovely night.